everybody, I hope you're doing well. I thought for this evening that I would look at a subject that I've been covering in some of my streams that I've been doing on my YouTube channel recently. I'm really enjoying doing the streams, but I appreciate that obviously due to the length of them, they're not always the best way to give out tutorial or how-tos and so forth, because let's be honest, for a lot of people they don't have 2.5 hours to sit through and watch a playback of the stream or watch it live to hear the salient points about how to do a particular aspect of pixel art or whatever it is that I might be demonstrating that evening or whenever I'm doing the streams. So for today's little video I thought I'd look at stencils in Deluxe Paint. This is something quite particular to Deluxe Paint, or indeed older styles of pixel art packages such as Brilliance and other packages that are around in the 90s. But one of the things that quite often comes up from people when they think about Deluxe Paint is that they wish that it was able to handle layers. And in effect with stencils, we do have the possibility of effecting layers through the use of stencils. So it's a really cool function that has been part of the package for as long as I can remember it. It's certainly part of Deluxe Paint Free, which is easily available on eBay for reasonable prices. So just sit back whilst I show you how you can make use of stencils to in effect give you layers in Deluxe Paint. I hope you enjoy. Okay, let's bring up the graphics that I've been working on. I've been working on a reimagining of the opening scene of Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is one of my all-time favourite animes. And what I've done is I've split up the graphic into its various components. So let's just bring up the background in Deluxe Paint. I'm using Deluxe Paint 4 here, but any version like Deluxe Paint 3 will work just fine. And you can see here that the palette is only 16 colours, and that all of the graphics that we're going to be using today will fit within that 16 colour space. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some trees to the foreground. I'm going to show you how Stencils allows us to layer this up. So let's load in a brush. I drew a very basic tree, just a sort of evergreen tree. So let's just bring this one in. And I'm just going to press J on the keyboard to flip to the spare screen and stamp it down. I'm going to press J again and that will bring me back to the main picture. You can also switch to the spare page by going to Picture, Spare and Swap. So let's go back. Let's load in another brush with another tree. And basically all these brushes are all the same. They're just a slightly smaller or slightly larger version of this tree brush. In fact, that one looks almost identical to the first one, but it's just ever so slightly smaller. Okay, so let's pick up our first brush again, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit more detail to this foreground layer here, but I want to do it using this very deep forest green. And what I can do is that if I pick the colour in the swatches here and then right click and go to mode and choose colour, you'll see that it has now become a solid representation of the object in the colour that's over here. So if I choose this light blue, it also becomes light blue. You can also use the F2 key on your keyboard to get to this setting. And what this allows me to do is just very carefully stamp down just a few little copies of this silhouette, shall we say, of the third tree. And you can see how easy it is just to build up some details here. I'm keeping the middle of the picture just here free on purpose, because that's where Shinji is going to be standing when I finish the whole composition. So I'm just going to put a few of these down. There we go. So I'm quite happy with that. I might just add a little bit more detail here. I might even just flip the brush because it's a shadow. I can press X on the keyboard to do a horizontal flip, and that will just add a little of extra variety. and just make it look that little bit more naturalistic. There we go. So what this now gives us is a pretty decent background there. So I'm just going to press F10 to bring back my menu and toolbar. I'm going to press the J key to go back to the spare screen, and I'm going to pick up the brush again. And what I can do is I can just then stamp down this tree, perhaps here, maybe one here. There we go. I don't want to go overboard with this, but just a little bit here and there. Maybe I'll just put one of these in here like so. And this one there. There we go. I'm quite happy with that. So you may suddenly think, oh, I can actually put another layer in there just to give a bit more depth. And what we can do is, again, we can choose the colour option. And let's say we want to use this almost sagey green here. And we want to put it just behind these trees here. Well, unfortunately, we won't be able to because we've already stamped down our other brushes. So if we was to put it there, it'd look a little bit silly. So what we need to do is create a stencil. And the way that we do this is to go up to the Effects menu, Stencil, and Make. You can also use the tilde key on your keyboard, which is just above the apostrophe, to get to the stencil tool. And what we want to do is set the colours that we want the brush to not affect at all. And the colours we don't want to affect are actually the colours of these trees. So I can click on the colours of that I want to avoid actually on the picture itself. And you'll see that these little colour swatches get little tabs next to them. And this means that when we go to stamp down the brush, it will avoid using these colours. So if I click, avoid affecting those colours. So if I click Make, you'll now see that this brush actually sits behind. And this allows us to, in effect, use the stencil as a layer, which gives us a lot of flexibility. I might just flip the brush again there to fill in these little gaps and make it look much more naturalistic. How cool is that? It just gives us so much potential. And with the power of animation, we could do parallax effects and so forth. There we go. And so what we end up with is some really nicely layered up graphics. And I can come back in here, perhaps choose this version of the brush, and by turning the stencil off, I can just place another copy of this tree just over the top. The hardest choice you're going to have is, where do you want to put it? Let's put it there. There we go. That's how we can in effect do layers. But what we can also do with stencils is pick out the bits that we want to cut out from a picture. So we can say, well, actually, I only want to pick out these trees at the front here. So by going Shift and apostrophe to get the stencil requester up again by using its keyboard shortcut, I don't want to lock these colours. I want to pick up everything, well, those two colours, but leave everything else behind. So if I invert it, everything is going to be ignored except these two colours. If I click Make and then hit the F10 key to hide the toolbar and go to my brush, I can cut out those trees, and then by pressing the tilde key again, I get a brush with just those trees. This is really powerful, huh? Obviously I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to put these back in. There we go. So let's say, for example, I've also drawn some clouds, which I have done. So I'm just going to go to my spare page by pressing J again. Go to picture and load. And I'm just going to load up my sky that I've drawn. So here you can see that I've drawn these rather effective clouds. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up a copy of those clouds. There we go. So I've got my brush with my clouds. I'm going to go back to my main screen, and you'll see here that if I was to stamp this brush down, it's going to overlap with the mountains and so forth, so that's no good. What I want to do is be able to put these clouds behind the mountains. So again, if I go to Effects, Stencil, Make, I can then clear the previous stencil and say that I don't want the clouds to affect this colour or this colour. Sorry, that one didn't click. This colour, also this colour on the mountains, but also this colour of the trees and this colour of the trees, and also this shadow here as well. So now when I click Make, what will happen is that the stencil will mean that none of those areas or colours will be erased. And this allows me to position these clouds just behind the mountains here. Now I can see that actually there's a little bit of clash here in these highlight areas. So I'm going to need to do a little bit of work on those. So what I can do is if I just clear my current brush by pressing full stop, go to magnify, I can protect those colours by making it a colour that I'm not using. Flood fill them. There we go. And I might just correct my little bit here. Oh, it's time for the stencil. Okay. And I think there's also this bit here. There we go. And it looks like we've got a little bit there as well. There we are. Obviously I'd make sure that this was sorted out before I actually stamped down the stencil, but there we go. And now I can bring my brush back by right clicking on the brush tool, and you'll see that it's restored the clouds. Then I do Shift and Tab to see what the stencil is. I'm happy with that. Click Make, and I can now position my clouds. Just remember, you can actually just hit the tilde key to turn the stencil on and off easily with your keyboard. I press F10 to hide the toolbars, and I also want to make sure that I'm protecting this dark blue colour that I used. So I'm going to bring up the stencil request again with Shift and apostrophe. Click Make, and voila. I can then position to keep the clouds exactly where I want them. So I think there's about good. And then I can turn my stencil back off again, go back to a pixel brush, hit M on the keyboard to bring up the magnifying glass, and I can just colour in these areas as I had them before. But the other thing is that I could do is I could actually use a stencil to do that. So again, I could use Shift and apostrophe to bring up the stencil requester, clear the existing stencil, and because I just want to affect all colours, just this blue colour, sorry, I can click the colour as if I were to protect it, but then invert it to say that I only want to affect this blue colour. Click Make, choose the freehand tool, a suitably sized brush, and the colour that I want to use, and I can just fill in these areas here, like so. And it means that I'll only affect that blue colour. And that is the power of stencils. It's really neat. It's a way of being able to do layers in Deluxe Paint without having to have layers. So there we go. I'm quite happy with that composition. I'm going to go to picture, save, and I'm just going to call this interim composite 4. There we go. That looks pretty good to me. Really happy with that. So the other thing that I just want to mention is the ability to have a background layer. If you right click and go to background, you'll see that you can actually fix the background. And what this allows you to do is to create a layer over the top of your background. So say for example, I drew a rather obnoxious smiley face here. Now, any of you who know Deluxe Paint will know that you only have one level of undo, and I've just clicked the mouse 3 times there, and if I click undo, all it's going to do is remove and re-add my last stroke. However, with the power of the background layer, I can click clear and you can see that I can get back to exactly where I was before. It's really neat and really powerful, and by doing this I'm able to actually then increase my colour palette. I'm going to bring this up to 32 colours. I'm okay with deleting my spare page because I'm not using it. No, I don't want to stretch the image to fit the page. There we go. There's my background layer. And by choosing a new colour in the second 16 colours of the 32 colour palette, I'm just going to mix up a very obvious colour here. So a green usually works quite well. Let's go for something like that. There we go. That should work quite nicely. That will stand out. I click OK, lock the background again, and I can actually use this colour to draw my sketch of my character that is going to go in here. So in this case, that would be Shinji. So I can draw out my circle, I can draw out my dividing line of roughly where his top of his eyes will be, and you know, I can do all the usual work that I would do to create my sketch. There we go. Of course, obviously I can use the brush tool and I don't end up picking up the background. So I'm just going to take this half of the face. See my brush there? No background. Press X to flip it. And that will mean that I can draw an exact copy of the face for the opposite side. Because in manga or anime, if you're doing the animated form, symmetry is so important. And then I can just use the rectangle tool because it's quite a quick and easy way to remove stuff. And with the right mouse button, I can just click and drag across to remove these markings here because I don't actually need these ones. There we go. That's looking good. Okay, excellent. And then what I can do is I can pick a colour that I'm perhaps using for the actual face, and I can just fill it in, and you'll see that it's actually filling in over the background. Now obviously the green lines are still there, but because they're part of the foreground layer, if you will. And that then allows me to perhaps use a stencil again to only affect certain parts of this drawing. So I might draw these guidelines with this orange because I want to keep these ones like so, and then I want to bring up the stencil again, so I can go to stencils and say I want to change the lime green colour. So I choose the lime green, I invert it because I do want to affect it, click make, choose the filled rectangle tool and black, and then I can basically just drag over, and you can see how I've basically gone in over my sketch outline. And then turn off my stencil, clear, or just hit the tilde key rather. I can then pick this up as a brush, and there it is. Or I can go to the brush tool, right click and release, and as you can see, it's completely independent of the background layer. That is how powerful stencils are. So I hope you really enjoyed that tutorial, nice and quick, and it shows you really the power of Deluxe Paint, or indeed a package similar to it. The key is palette management. Think about what you want to draw and divvy up your palette before you've even started. I use a very simple method of ensuring that I keep my backgrounds and so forth to the first 16 colours, and then my actual characters to the latter 16 colours. If you stick to the same methods each time, you'll be guaranteed some form of success. Don't think that on your first attempt, if it doesn't come out quite as good as what you've seen today, is a failure. Nothing's a failure. The key to all of this is to keep on practicing, to keep on having fun with it, and just relax and enjoy the process. There's nothing worse than expecting amazing results on your first go. The thing is that you'll improve very quickly, but just give yourself the time and space to do it in, and most of all, as I say, just enjoy it. It's been really fun to share another video with you, and with the new equipment that I have bought for the streaming service, I can hopefully also develop my actual video fixtures for the channel much more rapidly, much more consistently now. And I guess that all remains for me to say is, see you soon. Bye.